So flow. So what is flow?
And so Wu Wei is the principle of not forcing in anything that you do. Now we know when we watch any performance of an artist, be it a dancer or an actor or a musician, we know immediately when the performance is forced. And we say it doesn't ring true, it's too artificial, it doesn't seem to be natural. Many people who study the Taoist doctrines think that Wu Wei means do nothing. In the sense of laissez-faire, be lazy, always be passive. It doesn't mean that. There is a time for action. When you study judo, you use muscle only at the right moment. When your opponent is hopelessly overextended and off balance, and you add a little muscle to it and you throw him across the room. But only then. You never use muscle at the wrong moment. For as Shakespeare knew perfectly well, there is a tide in the affairs of men which, taken at its flood, leads on to fortune. And so Wu Wei is based on knowledge of the tide, the drift of things. Get with it. Wu Wei is the art of sailing rather than the art of rowing. So, one of the most famous sayings in the Lao Tzu book is superior virtue has no intention to be virtuous, and thus is virtue. Inferior virtue cannot let go of virtuosity, and thus is not virtue. So one could also say, the real Wu Wei is not intentionally Wu Wei, and so is Wu Wei. But inferior Wu Wei so tries to be Wu Wei that it isn't.
So flow is the state of complete absorption in an intrinsically rewarding activity. And intrinsically meaning it's within myself. So it's not, I'm not doing this to make my grandparents proud. I'm not doing this to make my parents proud. I'm not doing this because I want my friends to think I'm cool. You know, it's because you actively enjoy that thing. Key aspects of flow are like being able to concentrate, taking that control over a task and that immersion, and the way that you can tell that you are in a flow state is how fast, time passes. So like, for example, there's that saying, time passes when you're having fun, time flies. I have a mentor who taught me how to juggle. Shout out to Dan. And he's really cool. He found the importance of flow arts, and through it, he has become the coolest person, one of the coolest people I've ever met in my life. He literally is like, we were on Ripley's Believe It or Not. I was in the video. It was so cool. He's a neurosurgeon, a race car driver. He does circus and spins fire. Like, he has really incorporated flow into his life so hardcore that it has made him one of the most interesting, successful people in the world. So yeah, shout out to Dan. But yeah, there's all types of flow arts. There's you can find it in anything. So there are a lot of benefits to this.
When I talk about peak performance, I often define peak performance as getting our biology to work for us rather than against us. What I'm really talking about are the systems underneath what we call motivation, learning, creativity, and flow. And flow is an optimized state of consciousness where we feel our best and we perform our best. More specifically, it refers to any of those moments of rapt attention and total absorption. You're so focused on the task at hand, so focused on what you're doing, everything else just seems to disappear. Action and awareness are going to start to emerge. Your sense of self, sense of self-consciousness, that voice in your head, your inner critic are all going to diminish. Time is going to dilate, which is a fancy way of saying it's going to pass strangely. One of the reasons learning goes up so much in flow is because it's this huge cocktail dump of 5 or 6 of the most important feel-good neurochemicals the brain can produce, and we tend to remember things that happen in flow states. In fact, for most people, if you're looking at positive memories, right, things you remember that are really strong, that are really locked into memory, chances are they're things that took place in a flow state. There has been a lot of work, because of this very mechanism, in using flow to overwrite and rewrite PTSD. The Army tested a combination of talk therapy and surfing. Surfing is an experience that's packed with flow triggers. 5 weeks of surfing twice a week and regular talk therapy sessions after the surf sessions was enough to significantly reduce or completely remove symptoms of PTSD and lower people's need for medication or get them off medication completely. PTSD is basically a very strong memory that's been written and everything sort of flows back to it, and flow seems to be able to override that memory because it's such a potent neurochemical dump. We know that flow has been very useful in the treatment of addiction. There are, for example, a number of rehab centers, usually aimed at teenagers, where to get kids off drugs, they're taking them into the mountains and giving them outdoor high-flow experiences. Knowing what we now know about the way that experiences can produce different neurochemicals, it doesn't seem too odd that sometime in the future we're going to start to see doctors or psychologists prescribing experiences. I always tell my friends when their relationships end, the easiest way to override heartbreak is to go skydiving. The problem with heartbreak or grief or all those things is basically every memory you have goes back to the person you just lost, right? That's why you walk through your house and everything reminds you of the one that got away. You actually have to override the memory. You have to have an experience that's more powerful than that. Skydiving and the kind of immediate deep flow state it tends to produce in most people will tend to override that. I'm not saying we're going to go to the doctor for heartbreak and they're going to prescribe skydiving, but it would work. And there might come a time in the future where we actually think that way.
Like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, through flow, you can achieve all of these things individually, food, water, shelter, clothing. There's some people that find it in terms of having like a job, you find your workflow, and like that is a literal term. You find workflow. I find a flow state sometimes when I work doing dishes, where I'm just in a state of existence in the present moment. I can, ground myself sometimes. There's also people that do flow to get food, like they do their gardening and they're in that, and they do that for hours and they have no sense of how long they've been doing it. That's a flow state. It doesn't have to be, a necessarily creative thing. It can be more practical. And through doing that, you can apply that flow state to different areas of life and, go up the ladder. For example, like going past here, flow arts gives me social ability. I'm doing all the things that I intrinsically I love doing. Whether it's difficult for me or not, I've found community in that. I have become professional, and from that found a sense of self-esteem that I've never felt before when you have like thousands of people in front of you and they're all aggressively agreeing with you. Equalization, where like I know now through sort of publicizing my flow states that I can be and do so much more with what I love than I had previously thought. Because growing up, there are a lot of people, I hope you don't know this, but most people do, that the starving artist concept of like, you're never going to be able to do what you love and have stability or have a house or have a family because you're going to be, involved in that, and it doesn't really make you money and whatever, but that's not even true. So life. And then there's also the concept of PERMA, where it applies where
Engagement. What are the things that help you to lose track of time? In positive psychology and PERMA, flow describes a state of immersion in the present moment. When we are absorbed entirely in the present moment, we create momentum. And when we truly engage with our life and work, we can become absorbed. Our energy and focus can increase so that we can enter that flow state.
Even in PERMA, and PERMA is a huge concept on well-rounded well-being, where if you have a bunch of these, aspects of your life, if you have these things included in your life, then you will find well-being. And E is literally flow. Like, it is quite literally flow. So if you have this, and then you have, through this, with this, causes the rest of them, you find a flow state, something you like intrinsically, you find somebody else who also likes that thing intrinsically, you become friends because you have mutual interests. That creates relationships, that creates meaning in your life. And through that, that also creates achievement. Like, me and my friend, we did this cool thing together, and I'm proud of it. Like, that is achievement. One day I ended up opening for Nero. It literally just started with me practicing this flow. People that read a lot, sometimes that flow becomes them being an English professor. Like, this is my family. That's me. I don't know if you could tell. That's me. This was us after a show we did. I believe I did 2 types of flow. All of these people practice flow in front of 10,000 people, I want to say, that night. Really cool, really fun. The sense of well-being, like, look how freaking happy we all are. Like, if that doesn't tell you that flow is important to well-being, I don't know what else will, man. Misunderstandings. Okay. I've noticed a lot of misunderstandings when it comes to flow, like, that whole happiness is not a set point thing. You think, okay, well, everything peace here. No, like, that positive upward spiral that they talk about in, like, Fredrickson's 2.0, like, finding the things, it doesn't even have to be one thing, it can be anything, like, that you're interested in, and immersing yourself into that. Other people recognize that. And when they're into the same thing, you create a family. And there's, you got to get past that creative stigma that they have, where it's like, you can't, you're a snowflake. You can't be whatever you want to be. Yeah, you can. It's hard, it's not going to be easy. There's a lot of turmoil. There's a lot of social aspects that are not fun, but there's also so much beauty to it. You know what I mean? Flow has to be, this creative thing. No, it doesn't. It's, like I said, it can be reading. It can be, I don't know, binge watching. So much Netflix. You can just do that and get outside of yourself and immerse yourself in emotionally connecting with characters on an anime. Weird way to do flow. I do that. It's really something that you have to find out for yourself. And the rest all just kind of like fall into place. So applying flow. I talked about this a lot already, but look, that's me. Like, just like looking at my face, these little shadows are like a crap ton of people. Like, all over. Like, there's so many people there. And I have huge anxiety. Can barely talk in front of people a lot of the time. Or just talk to people. Like, I seem very confident. I mask very well, but I can barely talk to my roommates. And, but then I can do this flow in front of 10,000 people on a beach. Like, and completely be out of self. Where the only thing that I'm focused on, the only thing that I'm doing in my head is physical movement. Like, probably the only things I'm really thinking about is, don't burn yourself. This was actually my first time doing Dragon Staff. And, like, the difference, obviously, like, I am kind of in my head a little terrified. I feel I'm very, like, tense, but I'm still doing the thing. This one would be like that concept of, not doing it, not trying, but, like, not as good as this. Because this I've done for a long time, and I'm not thinking. I'm really not thinking about anything. I'm just there. I'm listening to the music. I'm just moving with it. It is what it is. But there's other things that I do that are flow. Like, I paint. I paint a lot. Whether it's digital or physical, talking to people. Sometimes I find flow in talking to people. I'm finding that right now. I can sit there and work on FL Studio and do a song and be working on that song and lose track of time. And my friend Jeff will be like, bro, you've been doing that for 5 hours. Are you done with that song yet? I'm like, no, there's still more to go. Like, but I didn't even notice 5 hours had gone by. Like, it's crazy. It's crazy. And me and Dan were talking about it one time, and he said, like, there was a study within the neuroscience community that finding flow, specifically the research was juggling, but finding flow can also, like, reactivate plasticity in the brain and like build brain cells or something. Don't quote me on that, but but like it's really cool that, like, doing something that you love mindlessly basically is so essential and so critical and such a building block of becoming somebody in society, which is why it's so important to me. Eventually, I want to have my nonprofit, and it is all based around this concept of finding something that you love, having, if you need a mentor, we got you, here's a mentor, supporting each other in that mutual, like, common ground, essentially. But yeah, no, that's flow, in a nutshell, my ideas of it, clinical ideas of it, and here's my citations. All right, that's all I got, though.